You're standing on one of the most dangerous pieces of real estate in America right now, even if you're just reading this from the comfort of your home. Why? Because the lessons learned from the ground beneath San Francisco didn't just save that city. They saved yours too. Every modern building code, every earthquake drill in schools, every base-isolated hospital that can save lives during disasters. They all trace their DNA back to the catastrophic moments, when San Francisco's Earth decided to remind humanity of its insignificance. This is the story of how death and destruction birthed the science that protects billions of people today. At 5:12 a.m. on April 18, 1906, a Wednesday morning, San Francisco's residents felt a mild tremor. 20 seconds later, the real terror began. A massive 7.9 magnitude earthquake lasting 45 seconds struck the San Andreas Fault, rupturing for 296 miles. The ground didn't just shake. It liquefied, swallowed buildings whole, and twisted steel like paper clips. But here's what most people don't know. The earthquake itself wasn't the main killer. It was what came after. More than 3,000 people died, and over 80% of the city was destroyed, not primarily from the shaking, but from fires that raged for 3 days. Why couldn't firefighters stop them? The earthquake had shattered every water main. Fire Chief Dennis Sullivan, who might have coordinated an effective response, was killed when his own firehouse collapsed on him. What happened next reveals a disturbing pattern that would echo through future disasters. Brigadier General Frederick Funston illegally and unilaterally placed San Francisco under martial law, issuing standing orders to shoot suspected looters on sight. But here's the shocking part. This order was applied unevenly. Respectable residents were only warned, while less affluent people were shot. Between 227,000 and 300,000 people were left homeless out of a population of about 410,000. Where did they all go? Approximately 40,000 flocked to Golden Gate Park, where vast refugee camps were established. But these weren't temporary shelters of mercy. They were instruments of control and labor extraction. The Committee of 50, led by former Mayor James Felon, set up permanent refugee camps in the Presidio and Golden Gate Park, but under the condition that the homeless labor to rebuild the city. Think about that. You've just lost everything. Your family might be dead, and your relief comes with mandatory unpaid construction work. Even more disturbing, Chinese residents of San Francisco were forced to a segregated camp in a remote area of the Presidio, farther away from access to medical care and food supplies. Racism didn't take a break for disaster. What if I told you that some homeowners deliberately burned down their own earthquake-damaged homes? They did because their insurance policies covered fire damage, but not earthquake damage. These arson fires contributed to the inferno that consumed the city. From catastrophe came revelation. University of California, Berkeley geologist Andrew Lawson published what remains the authoritative work on the earthquake, the Lawson Report of 1908. This wasn't just documentation. It was the birth certificate of modern seismology. Lawson's analysis of the 1906 displacements led Harry Fielding Reid to formulate his elastic-rebound theory of the earthquake source in 1910, which remains today the principle of earthquake mechanics. For the first time, humans understood that earthquakes weren't divine punishment or random chaos. They were the inevitable result of tectonic plates building up stress and releasing it violently. The 1906 earthquake revealed the importance of site conditions and spurred the creation of building codes, including the 1927 Uniform Building Code. Buildings on solid bedrock survived. Buildings on reclaimed bayfill loose, sandy soil collapsed or sank into the ground. This single observation would save millions of lives in the century to come. The Army built 5,610 redwood and fir relief houses to accommodate 20,000 displaced people, painted navy blue and rented for $2 per month until rebuilding was completed. The last official refugee camp closed on June 30th, 1908, more than 2 years after the disaster. At least 30 of these earthquake shacks survive today as historic landmarks. For 51 years after 1906, San Franciscans lived in relative seismic peace. Then came what locals call the Forgotten Quake. At 11:45 a.m. on Friday, March 22, 1957, a 5.3 magnitude earthquake struck. The strongest since 1906. 8 foreshocks preceded the main event, and the focal mechanism showed oblique movement on a steeply dipping thrust fault, different from the strike-slip movement of 1906. This meant the San Andreas Fault was even more complex and dangerous than scientists thought. Why do we call it forgotten? 1 person died, 40 were injured, and damage total at about $1 million. Minimal compared to 1906, but its scientific value was enormous. For the first time, 13 strong motion instruments captured the earthquake, with a maximum peak ground acceleration of 0.18 grams recorded. This data became the foundation for understanding how buildings actually move during earthquakes. The 1957 earthquake tested the building codes created after 1906. They mostly worked. The city didn't collapse. The fires didn't consume everything. Modern construction, informed by Lawson's research, had made San Francisco dramatically safer in just 5 decades. The Loma Prieta earthquake of October 17, 1989, occurred at the worst possible time, 5:04 p.m., during rush hour and the best possible time. How? The earthquake struck just before the start of the 3rd game of the 1989 World Series between the San Francisco Giants and the Oakland Athletics at Candlestick Park. Thousands of people had left work early to watch the game or were already at the stadium. The highways that would normally be packed with rush hour traffic were emptier than usual. This accident of timing saved countless lives. The 6.9 magnitude earthquake lasted 15 seconds, killed 63 people, injured 3,757, and caused an estimated $6 billion in damage. About 3,000 people were left homeless, with around 12,000 homes and 2,600 businesses damaged or destroyed. But the Loma Prieta earthquake wasn't just about destruction. It was about revelation. The disaster exposed exactly where the 1906 lessons had been learned and where they'd been ignored. San Francisco's Marina District became the poster child for what happens when you ignore geological reality. Built on landfill from the 1906 earthquake debris, the unreinforced masonry buildings in the marina suffered severe damage due to liquefaction and ground failure. The same soil amplification phenomenon that killed thousands in 1906 struck again in 1989, the exact same locations. Meanwhile, 42 people died when the Cypress Street Viaduct, a double-deck portion of the Nimitz Freeway in Oakland, collapsed, crushing cars on the lower deck. One section of the Bay Bridge collapsed. Critical infrastructure that millions depended on daily proved vulnerable in seconds. As building inspectors started red-tagging buildings in the days after the earthquake, shelter populations increased day after day after day, creating what one Red Cross official called this constantly escalating disaster. Unlike 1906, there was no martial law, no shoot-to-kill orders, no forced labor camps. The disaster response had evolved. What if buildings could dance? This isn't a metaphor. After 1989, engineers developed technologies that literally let buildings move during earthquakes, and that's what saves lives. Face isolation, one of the most powerful tools of earthquake engineering, uses rubber bearings, friction bearings, and lid cores to substantially decouple a superstructure from the shaking ground. Face isolator bearings were pioneered in New Zealand by Dr. Bill Robinson during the 1970s. With the bearing consisting of layers of rubber and steel, with a lid core invented in 1974. San Francisco City Hall damaged in the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake underwent the largest base isolation retrofit project of its time, with 530 columns and approximately 1,500 linear feet of massive brick walls cut and temporarily jacked to install base isolators. Today, the 1915 building can survive earthquakes that would have destroyed it in 1906. In response to the Loma Prieta earthquake, the California legislature created the Seismic Hazard Zoning Program, overseen by the California Geological Survey. This program maps liquefaction zones and requires seismic investigations before construction can begin in high-risk areas. The 1989 earthquake advanced bridge design and retrofit techniques and increased focus on lifeline engineering for transportation and utilities. In the aftermath, all bridges in the area underwent seismic retrofitting to make them more resistant to earthquakes. San Francisco's earthquakes didn't just change San Francisco, they changed the world. Today, earthquake-proof buildings use flexible foundations, damping systems, shear walls, cross braces, diaphragms, and moment-resisting frames technologies that directly descend from lessons learned in San Francisco. Base isolators now protect structures from earthquake shocks in cities from San Francisco to Tokyo to Istanbul. The Transamerica Pyramid, San Francisco's most iconic modern building, incorporates diagonal trusses at its base that protect it from both horizontal and vertical force as engineering decisions, made possible by the strong motion recordings from 1957 and detailed damage studies from 1906. Seismic base isolation has been used to retrofit prominent U.S. monuments, including Pasadena City Hall, Salt Lake City and County Building, and L.A. City Hall. The technology is patent-free, allowing broader access worldwide. Buildings from airports in Turkey to Hindu temples in California now incorporate these life-saving innovations. Between 1836 and 1911, there were 18 earthquakes of magnitude 6 or larger in the Bay Area during a 75-year period. Yet there were no events of this magnitude during the 68 years between 1911 and 1979. Then, beginning in 1979, 4 earthquakes of magnitude 6 or greater occurred, leading geologists to believe we entered a new era of major earthquake activity similar to the period before 1911. The pattern is clear but unpredictable. Earthquakes cluster in time. We can't predict when the next big one will strike, but we know it will. What we can predict is this: when it does strike, fewer people will die than would have in 1906, 1957, or even 1989. Not because earthquakes have become weaker, but because humans have become smarter. Every base-isolated hospital that stays functional during a disaster, every retrofitted bridge that doesn't collapse, San Francisco's earthquakes didn't just reshape a city. They reshaped how humans understand and survive natural disasters everywhere. From the refugee camps of Golden Gate Park to the base isolators beneath modern skyscrapers, from the shoot-to-kill orders of 1906 to the coordinated emergency responses of today, these earthquakes wrote the playbook for disaster science. And that playbook is still being written. The next chapter will be written by the next earthquake. Let's hope the lessons we've learned are enough.